Welcome back in to the David L. Gray Show, Off Code Unscripted on Saint Dominic's Media. Glad to have you in here for this awesome show. We got Kyle Dean here. He's from the YouTube channel Catholic Holist. Check him out there. I was over there doing the interview the other day. Wonderful interview, long form. We talked about a lot of things. One thing that came up is a lot of you had asked me over the years, David, can you talk about exorcism? In particular, some people are asking me to comment on what I think about what Father Kyle Rippinger and some other YouTube well-known exorcists are doing when they talk about what they heard from demons in these exorcisms. So, David, can you talk about that? What do you think about that? So, I was on Kyle Dean's show, gave my thoughts on that, listened to what he had to say, and then the other day I come back and do a more long-form talk on this. A lot of you guys appreciated that video, so I want to bring Kyle back into the conversation and talk more about it in a conversational type of way. Also, I want to get into artificial intelligence and how Catholics and Catholic apostolates and ministry should approach that. I would just lay people and whoever, just what should we think about artificial intelligence? How should we leverage it? Should we stay away from it? Just have a general kick that topic around. So that's what we're doing today on the David L. Gray Show. Appreciate you again coming in for this live stream. And without further ado, let's go ahead, just get into it. I'll see you in a moment on the other side of the zip. Kyle Dean, welcome into the David L. Gray Show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. I really had a good time on your podcast the other day. We had a great conversation. So I said, man, maybe we should come back and do this again and maybe just kick a few topics around every now and then. So today I want to talk about, what I call demon gnosis and this private revelation that exorcists are getting out of these exorcisms and coming and telling us about it. And I'm going to tell you about some of my concerns to hear what you have to say as well, see what we think about this topic. But first, since this is your first time on my platform, I just want to just kind of introduce you and let everybody know who you are. So you are Kyle Dean. You are from the Diocese of Buffalo, New York, a father of 4, a husband of 1. And your YouTube channel, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question, and again for having me on. So yeah, we started out with Kyle Dean Gorlick, the YouTube channel. It's essentially just me coming into the public sphere to share all things spiritual theology. Let's see, I'm going to get the over here, you got the spiritual theology book. That is probably something that is most near and dear to my heart. So I'm almost done with the theology masters, 4.0 thus far. Please keep praying for me. And what I have noticed with every different competency, subcompetency in theology, I humbly submit that spiritual theology is the most pragmatic of them all. You've got the subsect of mystical theology connected in there. And then also, I would argue, of course, you pepper in some moral theology. But spiritual theology is where you're going to get the holistic Catholic perspective. I mean, you're talking the 9 levels of prayer. You're talking the 7 heavenly virtues. You've got the 4 cardinal: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. And then you've got the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. You've got the different kinds of grace, right? Sanctifying grace, actual grace, gratuitous graces. That's where the charisms come in. And when you put all of that together, when you have a comprehensive understanding of that, you've got the blueprint of sanctity, what it means to become a saint. And for me, I love, chopping it up and theologizing and getting into all different things. Theological disputation, of course, as you well know, David, as well, is such an important tool in our toolkit. In order to come to a better understanding of what, God thinks, right? The theology of God. Theos is Greek for God, and then, ology. So, and that is a critical component in all of this as well, because when you understand the knowledge, when you understand the truth as it rests in our intellect, which is also where the theological virtue of faith resides, we're able to convert that in what Saint Teresa of Calcutta calls the longest journey of mankind, which is from the head to the heart. And that's where you get to the will, the theological virtues of hope, and ultimately charity, the form of all the virtues. And that's the quest. That's the quest, man. So I really appreciate what you're doing over here as well, because, you've been shedding light on this topic and essentially saying, I just don't understand what is the point of sharing some things that got discerned or learned within the context of an occult setting, namely the exorcism, ministry. And it can almost seem like demon gossip, or it can seem like, like Gnosis that is hidden. And if you're not careful, you could quickly slip into Gnosticism with that, right? So I look forward to getting into that, because as we got into on my channel, and thank you so much again for coming on, that's one of my areas of competency. As we get into the talk later on my my conversion journey, I'll do a quick flyby. It culminated in me being called by the Lord to serve our local exorcist, and that's developed into me having a vast network with numerous exorcists. You've got a little over 120 in the United States. There's 200 and something dioceses in the United States, so we'd like to see that number go up. But I look forward to getting into all of those things tonight as we discern this topic further.
Yeah, awesome, man. I love where you're headed in your spiritual journey. Also, is becoming more of an academic and theologian. I know you're working on some courses and some books and things like that, man. So I'm really excited that you're jumping in and following your calling. I can't wait to see where this whole thing goes with you. One thing that I really didn't get interested in this topic, until I was at Our Lady, our Sorrowful Mothers Ministry in Illinois. I think I was speaking there. Maybe I was just going to a conference, but anyway, Father Rippinger was there as well. And I think I was speaking there on Freemasonry, I think. And so I'm sitting down listening to his talk, and all of a sudden it turns into like this episode of Young and Restless, right? Where he starts speaking about things that he heard in exorcisms from demons. He would say it like this. He said, I was doing this one exorcism and this demon said to me this. Oh, and this time this demon said to me this. And he had like 3 or 4 of these. It didn't, it wasn't a whole litany, but it was enough for me to look around, Kyle, and see people kind of like on the edge of their seats, taking notes and just taking in this stuff. And I was like, man, are people, and I started to begin to wonder, and it was later confirmed, once he gets on YouTube and, I hear people start to quote him. And I said, are people getting their spiritual formation and some of their spiritual direction from demons based upon what demons said? Oh, this demon said, oh, this prayer is really scary. Or this demon said, these are the type of things that, they worry about. And now, to be sure, Kyle, I want to start a conversation like this before I get your thoughts. That
sure.
Now, in Scripture, we know we've heard from demons. Clearly, in the New Testament, and let me read a couple of them. In Mark 1:24, a demon-possessed man in the synagogue cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" Mark 5:7. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? In God's name, don't torture me. Luke 4:34. Go away. What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy Saul? I know you are the Holy One of God. Luke 8:28. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me. Luke 4:41. The demon came out of many, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked him. Jesus did not allow him to speak because they knew he was the Messiah. Matthew 8:24, they cried out, "What do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come to torture us before the appointed time?" And then also in Acts 9:15, a demon-possessed man said to the Jewish exorcist, Jesus I know, Paul I know about, but who are you? So we do have in Scripture, Kyle, obviously instances where demons speak, sometimes right before they're exorcised, right? but I think there's, a clear distinction, right? You never hear, of course, it's just historical, right? We don't take historical precedents and then like turn into like a systematic theology. But there is something to say here that um the instances of demons that we do hear about in scripture, Jesus never says that, oh, he doesn't use these moments of this demon speak as a preface or some sort of construct to evangelize through. And that's what I worry about. The Exorcist evangelizing through demonic gnosis, this private revelation they receive from demons. They use that as a way to evangelize. So the Exorcist has become some sort of evangelist today, and they're evangelizing through this secret knowledge that they heard from demons. So that's my concern. What are your thoughts about this topic?
Yeah, I really appreciate you opening by sharing more of the context in which you were kind of introduced to this, because the way you experienced it was a little bit different than the way I experienced it. You saw it firsthand. You're seeing live reactions in the audience, and you're able to discern, like, I can follow the chain of causation of this and see that there could be some negative outcomes. How can we perhaps, steel man this, do this better? The way that I came to recognize it regarding Father Ripperger, and as you know from our interview, I mean, I've really, really looked up to him. In fact, he's done some tremendous things for my life by virtue of putting some really important information out there. So I'm extremely thankful for that. I have, by virtue of running young adult ministry, the local ordinary has given me a mission and faculties to serve the young adults in our area. I've put on, at this point, well over 200 seminars where we have mostly played a Father Ripperger conference. He's got over 250 videos at this point, mostly through Sensus Fidelium. And of those, well over, probably over 100, maybe 150 at this point, I think it was 120 a few years ago, are these like 40-minute to an hour plus long conferences that he makes publicly available. And
Okay.
I've walked with many, many hundreds of young adults experiencing those conferences and then processing them together. So I have, I wasn't at that live event, although I've met Father Ripperger and we're colleagues now in the fight.
Yeah.
I saw it from the angle of what's on that public internet. And I would agree with you that, if somebody is only coming in and getting a little snapshot of one of those conferences without a broader context, there can be a spiritual danger or a concern there. And so I would say anecdotally, there's probably at least 8 of those conferences at this point where he touches explicitly on the topic of the demonic to the point where he's revealing about things that he learned in session. So I would say, before we dive into, the efficacy of that and any of the potential concerns or ways that could be better expressed, we should just back up and speak about the overall principles at work here, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of touched on it by going right to the Gospels, right? I mean, you can never go wrong going with sacred scripture. And you're right. We learned there that Jesus pedagogically is showing us through his interactions with the demonic, he's kind of gleaning some things for us that we can learn. When you see him asking the demons to reveal themselves and they say, "We are legion," you see there that they're lying in the sense that they're not giving him their actual names. But they're giving him a hint as to what's going on. Now, we know that Jesus is true God and true man. He's a divine son. So he knows everything. He already knows exactly what he's dealing with there. But he's showing us, by allowing that to be revealed through the sacred scripture, a few different things, right? One of which is that they are liars. So we have to be so cautious about, whatever it is that they would reveal to us. And as you aptly described, it's private revelation. So, we should probably start by defining, the parameters of private revelation as well, right? Private revelation is not binding on your faith whatsoever. You could go your entire life without, worrying about getting into any private revelation.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. But yeah, I would like to kit and play off you with this, because having seen it on my end, and becoming, really, other than someone who's directly in Father Ripperger's inner circle, in the English-speaking world, I'm one of the foremost experts on Father Chad Ripperger, because you'll see, behind me, I've got just about every single book that he's ever written. I've actually read almost all of it, in addition to seeing all of his conferences. So there's a lot that we can get into in terms of even the psychology behind that man himself, and why he does some of the things that he does.
Yeah. And I think, and I think I heard him quote some, I think it's a 1962 manual or something like that, instruction from the Vatican, where I think the exorcists do have, I think they're given guidance, right, to ask demons certain questions so that the exorcism can be an exorcism is a sacramental, it's not a sacrament, right?
Correct.
And, so but they're given guidance here about they can ask demons certain things so that the exorcism, so they can find out what's going on. That's the impression I got from it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get into that further, I was actually in touch with one of my colleagues in the fight, a clergyman that I have, walked alongside, helping souls to be liberated, helping to discern what kind of baggage, they're dealing with. And he directed me to chapter 18 of, hold on, I got my notes right here, the guidelines for the ministry of exorcism. And this book was originally published in late 2019 in Italian first. It comes straight out of Rome. There is no official doctrinal publication on the way to do exorcism, but this body, the International Association of Exorcists, is the closest thing that we have to it. It comes literally straight from Rome. This is where people are sent from around the world to be trained on this topic. And I remember, one of my colleagues got a copy of this book in Italian because it was the only language it was available in when it first came out. It has the imprimatur, and we were pouring it over in Italian together. We were kind of getting the early glimpses of, this is the future of the exorcism ministry in the global Catholic Church. If we can get everybody on board and bring the solidarity down to the subsidiarity, where you have all of these different pockets. I'd like to talk a little bit more about what's going on in America, because you get an interesting perspective when you juxtapose that with what's going on in some of the other countries with the exorcism ministry behind the scenes. It gives you a framework with which to acknowledge how we can all kind of grow in this together. So chapter 18, I've got to hear the English translation of the guidelines for the ministry of exorcism. I think it was translated in like 2022 or so, and it was promulgated in our native tongue. And chapter 18 is titled Questions to the Demon. And it goes paragraph by paragraph. It starts on paragraph 389 and it finishes on, let's see here, paragraph 410. So very scholarly. You have an opportunity to reference exact, chapter numbers, not unlike a catechism, right? And so it goes in explaining, I'll just read the first paragraph and then riff off from there. So paragraph 389 opens saying, in the exorcistic tradition, the questions asked by the exorcist to the devil in cases of real diabolical possession have always had an important place. The RR, which stands for the Romane Ritualum, is, or I might have that backwards. It's the Roman ritual that the exorcism is done out of. It dealt with them both in the normative part and in the rubrics, while the DESQ maintains an apparent silence on them. So what it's doing here is it's juxtaposing the more ancient form of doing exorcism with the current norms that have come out in the 20th century. And it's saying, just because something is not mentioned in one of the two doesn't mean that you can abrogate it. Not unlike if you look at the Codes of Canon Law 1917 and then you get the 1983 that comes in. There's something to being able to process the changes, the updates, and what is, still in effect. So the document continues to get in to the weeds on that. It explains the differences. And it goes on in paragraph 391 to say, this chapter aims to offer to the Association of International Exorcist priests some clarifications on this subject, suggesting appropriate and practical solutions. It goes on, the exorcist must be clear that it is never licit to ask the impure spirit for things that are not useful for liberation from the extraordinary action of the devil. This is, in fact, the purpose for which the church gives the exorcist the authorization to exorcise. Consequently, the exorcist can legitimately use only the means that lead to that end. And the chapter goes on to describe basically where the battle lines are drawn on that, right? You've got what are referred to as imprecations in the ministry of exorcism, and then you have deprecatory actions, right? And imprecatory prayers are direct, binding, commanding prayers. Only the exorcist has the authority to do that in certain contexts, whereas, we as laity in general, we can do deprecatory prayers over our peers, right? It's where you ask Jesus Christ to confect the blessing or the intercession or the petition, whatever it is. And so this chapter outlines, where those lines are drawn and what an exorcist is or isn't allowed to do. And it mentions St. Alphonsus de Liguori. It mentions other theologians that weigh in and have different views on this. And it's really fascinating because this is basically the international body's way of synthesizing a centuries-old debate, bringing all of the latest, greatest information to the fore, and then discerning together, how can we improve this super important ministry for Holy Mother Church?
What is that? Would you say in that international body are Eastern Orthodox Catholics or Eastern Rite Catholics? Or are they also part of this body? Because my understanding is that they also have exorcisms. Obviously, they don't tend to take the same form as what would be in Roman Rite, but also includes prayers and things like that. But do they also belong to this body to receive some sort of general guidance?
That's a really great question. I don't have a competency in that to answer that.
Okay.
I'd have to look more into the breadth of the International Association of Exorcists. But what we do know is, yes, there's a deep, rich theological tradition within the Eastern Catholic Church about exorcism. And of course, you have the branch off with Orthodoxy in 1054 and following. We all only share the first 7 ecumenical councils in common, whereas we're many councils after that now in the West. But if you want to have a high level understanding of what is shared in the East and the West, as opposed to some distinctions that can happen there, you would really need to go back to the origins of the minor and major orders in general in Catholicism. And it's super interesting because, you've got tonsure, where you get your hair chopped off, and then there's 7 grades. You have the order of porter, then you have the order of lector, then exorcist, then acolyte, then subdeacon, deacon, and priest. And the earliest document that we have of that written document goes back to, I want to say, the 100s, 200s at the absolute latest. So this is like pre-Christianity being legalized, Catholicism. This is when we're still in the catacombs. Like, this is ancient. And what that teaches us is that these minor orders organically developed in the life of Holy Mother Church out of course, the 3 major orders that you see referenced in, let's say, the book of Acts, chapter 6, about, bishop, priest, and deacon. And at that level 3, exorcist, there's a power there. And, those first 5 levels are considered, minor clerical orders before you shift into the major clerical orders. Well, actually, subdeacon's considered major, not to confuse that, though, with the consecrated orders, the munus of holy orders, which is only bishop, priest, deacon. But my point is that the powers that come with each of those grades increases and is contained in the lower ones. So for exorcism, you can even have laity today who do them. You can be an extraordinary minister of baptism, although that's generally rare because you want to have the ritual with that. And you can also see it in RCIA programs. So in the East, there's a more there's a wider scope of what they consider allowable because of their relationship to that ancient tradition, and how, you know, there's some distinctions there.
Yeah. So based on what you had read, as though I didn't hear any sort of caution or prohibition against the Exorcist coming out and sharing with us what they. I mean, this isn't a sacrament. This is not confession. There's no private seal, right? Or what, you know, if you heard something from, if Exorcist heard something from a demon, there's no sort of seal that they cannot tell us. But I didn't hear any sort of guidance, right?
Sure. No, we didn't get into that yet. But
Okay.
before we do, I think for a pastoral reasons, we should highlight, you know, I want to point out something that I've noticed watching Father Chad Ripperger's various conferences throughout all the years. And I think you'll appreciate this too. You know, we kit and played on the interview on my channel about just the overall status of like Catholic YouTube world and how information gets conveyed. And, you know, I remember in 2017, 2018, before Father Chad Ripperger was as big, you know, with these like celebrity exorcists, you've also got Father Vincent Lampert and you've got others. You would see people that would see one conference he's ever done, go onto a channel with like 100,000 subscribers and be like, I just learned all this incredible information and I decided to write a book about it. And these people are like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. And they're like, where did you get this from? And he's like, you know, there's just some priest on the internet who's just talking about this stuff. And his name's Father Chad Ripperger. And you always see all these different like pronunciations of his name. It's like, you know, German, it's a strong German name, Father Ripperger, you know, a hard G, not a soft G, Ripperger. And, you know, it's important to show that respect. But it also is a meta-analysis on how information gets spread and how it gets processed and who ends up being considered an expert on the topic. You know, you have people that just one-off take something and run with it. And I think that's dangerous because, to the point of our overall theme here, in all the different conferences where Father Ripperger gets to talking about things he learned in session, right? He starts sharing some things about what the demons taught him or what he learned, and his capability apparently to discern the difference between when they're telling the truth and when they're not, right? There's so much to process there for the everyday Catholic. You know, the everyday lady is just looking at that. And if you don't understand the mechanics of everything that's going on there, there are so many different ways that you can experience that and takeaways that you're going to get from that. Yeah. And I know in one of his talks, he says, my local bishop has given me a line for what I am and am not allowed to reveal about the demons, because he wants to go deeper into, you know, the theologians throughout the centuries have pointed out that there's a trifurcation of Lucifer's mind when he fell. It was a punishment for his sin of being the one who was supposed to be at the top of the heavenly angelic choirs. And the trifurcation was in the form of him having a triple split personality, because he's essentially like the anti-Trinity, right? So you see with Satan, who's considered the father of lies, he's the antithesis of God the Father, right? The father of truth and goodness. And then with Lucifer, he's the light bearer. And, you know, so he is the antithesis of Christ, Jesus Christ, who is true light from true light. And with Baal, you know, you've got the antithesis of the Holy Spirit. And in the one conference, Father Ripperger publicly revealed to the entire internet that there's this relationship that he's having with his bishop on. He's not allowed at this point to go deeper into what can be gleaned about Baal and his antithetical relationship to the Holy Trinity, specifically in relationship to the Holy Spirit. But maybe he's about to get those faculties soon, and he's about to start getting into it with more people. And when you hear something like that, you know, there's a couple of things that I have to say about that. One is that's really, really good context to have, right? And there is a challenge where in those other 7 Circa conferences where he starts talking about things he's learned in session, but you don't even know the slightest thing about the fact that his bishop has given him faculties. Those people who may never get the entire holistic picture are going to have a completely different takeaway than those who caught that specific conference, right? You get what I'm saying there. Yeah. And another thing that you can have a takeaway from that is, what are the everyday laity supposed to get out of, witnessing to this priest who is basically showing you that, and he gets into this in one of his conferences, like there's a way to discern when the demons are telling the truth and when they aren't. That, I think, is something that we should touch on because it goes back to what's in the document. It answers your question that you had for me. And it's just it's a delicate line to toe, because what if you're wrong? Right? We're talking about private revelation at the end of the day. So if you're wrong, then, what this document says on that is that the demons like to try to confuse you so that you'll go along with their thing, because then if you're doing that, the exorcist specifically, in the context of the exorcism, you're almost like you're glorifying the demons by going along with their mockery of God, which is why you have to be so careful to take every single thing they say with a grain of salt. And that leads me to a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from experts, exorcists, and, I have a whole team of healthcare professionals that I work alongside of in this field, some that have been involved for many, many decades. I mean, collectively, just numerous decades of experience. And they say, really, you're allowed to subscribe to the tenet that you should just not listen to anything that the demons have to share. Like, you're allowed to take that posture. Beyond just trying to maybe figure out their name, figuring out when they're going to be expelled, right? There's some things in this document with specificity. Let's get some specificity, and then I want to hear some of your thoughts, some of your reflections on what I've shared thus far here. I'll read paragraph 397. The exorcist sins if he questions the devil about future and occult things that are not pertinent to his office, especially if the revelation of occult things would accidentally harm anyone. Parentheses, for example, someone's honor and fame. On parentheses. Like everyone, the exorcist is, in fact, severely obliged to avoid the disgrace of his neighbor, right? Not so much of an issue there, because you never hear Father Ripperger talking about his actual clients with any level of specificity. Right. That would be completely ungermane. But then it goes on, and I'm saving a certain paragraph for you. We're going to get into it, but 400. It's real spicy because it shows the tension between different theological camps and how this is an ongoing disputation. But it says, regarding the questioning of demons by what name they are called, it gets into what you can do there. With regard to questioning demons, if the person is possessed by one or more evil spirits. With regard to questioning demons about the cause of their entry. With regard to questioning the demons on what day and time they will come out of the possessed. Mm-hmm. So it goes into these different paragraphs, and it actually states whether or not these are considered among the necessary questions. In other words, these are the specific things where if it's considered a necessary question, the exorcist is allowed to get into it in the session. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to, what, if anything, are you allowed to share beyond the session? I think we need to crack that egg open, because that really cuts to the heart of how do the rest of us process this kind of information.
Yeah. And I think that's really an essential thing. I like everything you said about what's going on inside of the session. The part about faculties is interesting, or the Ripperger's bishop has given him some sort of permission and some sort of license to share some things. That's interesting. I don't know if that gives me any sort of confidence, because again, in the context of private revelation, when it comes to these things, say if we're discerning, did Mary appear here? For example, Medjugorje, that discernment has been going on for decades, because it's ongoing.
Right.
appearances of the Blessed Mother Mary that have ended, and the church spends time discerning, was that real? Was that true? Should the faithful this private revelation, should the faithful be allowed to or be guided to believe it? Or should it not be? And so the church tends to take time with these things. So it concerns me that even though he's been given license to share this, we're jumping here. We're missing this phase of the sermon, and we're allowing Father here to just use a particular his metrics or his rubrics to say, okay, I can share this, I cannot share this, or some things you said concerning ball, things like that. Maybe he's getting further guidance. Man, that really deeply worries me that we don't have space here to let this thing play out, because Satan operates at a level that I guess typically lay or us humans may not be able to you know be able to have that discernment, and he could be misleading people. This form of demonic gnosis that's being used as a form of evangelization may also be a trick of Satan. That's what really concerns me, and the evangelization of it really worries me, that people could be misled. And again, I like to go back to what you said about the ball and all this stuff. Like, man, I just don't know what the laity would do with that. I don't, man. That just, we're talking about people taking things that they should not know. And Kyle, I live a very simple, spiritual life. I really do. There's sacraments, is rosary, is prayer.
Right.
And I try, even though I do the work of theology, I really try to keep it simple. Just focus on, how can I live the liturgy in my life,
Right.
practicing the virtues. Um, I don't know. Let me get to a couple of comments though before we go on.
Let's do it.
Nan Kelly, my friends, today, would you permit me that I am asking the chat to say the prayer to Saint Michael while we're talking about this? Yes.
Yo,
thank you for that.
Let's do that in Latin real quick. Sancti Michael Arcangele, defende nos in proelio, contra nequitiam et insidias diaboli esto presidium. Imperet illi Deus supplices deprecamur. Tuque princeps militiae celestis, Satanem aliosque spiritus malignos, qui ad perditionem animarum pervagantur in mundo, divina virtute in infernum detrude. Amen. Now, I have a background in Spanish more than Latin, so I probably miffed some of that, but
no, that's good. I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. We got
Saint. And William says, I served mass for Father Ripper at Ohio Dominican. Oh, that's the school where I graduated from a long time ago, where he was in Columbus for a talk. I actually enjoyed the demon gossip, but I can see where it isn't good for the faith, though. Yeah, I think it's, like I said, I think it's an episode on the Restless. I think it's very entertaining. It's secret knowledge, for some of the same reasons why many years ago I enjoyed being a Freemason. Like, oh, this is stuff that people don't know. This is juicy. Things like that does have a you can almost become addictive to it. You just want to know this stuff, and that's another path that I think people would go down. And like you said, I appreciate your love of a Father. Like you, I have many of his books back here. I don't think I've read them like obviously like you have, and this isn't an attack on him. I hope people don't come away with that at all. This is just a concern about the genre or the ministry of the Exorcist becoming an evangelist through the private of sharing the private revelation and giving people receiving that as a type of guidance and piquing their curiosity about this thing. So
Well, I actually have a question for you on that because you had a couple of videos as a precursor to this, and you came away with 4 main critiques. David L. Gray's 4 main critiques, in the Deliverance Prayers for the Laity book, right? And I found this to be extremely insightful. My book's around here somewhere, because you're an expert in Freemasonry. So I think that we should be, right? I'm a solution-focused person, right? When I hear what you're saying about what if people take away, the wrong thing about the private revelation, or what if it's wrong? You're absolutely right. And Holy Mother Church has an entire disposition on how everyday people should receive private revelation. And I think that there could be a danger there. So, you mentioned calling it Freemasonic instead of Freemasonry. Duly noted. I think they should take this into account and put out a second edition. You know what I mean? You say calling it the great architect of the universe instead of grand. You mentioned inserting Leo Taxil's myths into the book, right? Because you're the expert on that. I don't know much about that. So, if you know that and you can provide the source work, which is what we're doing, right? When we flex our actual theological prowess and ability to add to the conversation, right? That's critiquing as opposed to criticizing. Big difference, right? There's no ad hominems here. And then you said so much has been said that not enough has been said. I could speak a lot to that, and I think you nailed it on that one. Absolutely. I mean, I think all of them are great points. And it is a little weird, especially if he's got some error mixed in there with Leo Taxil, because it's like, if you say so much, then it's like, well, what about all those things that you still missed, right? It becomes, and also you can learn from how the church has developed the actual exorcism prayers themselves. You see that synthesizing and the more precision and sometimes simplification there. So there's absolutely something to that. But what I want to ask for you now, David, if I can throw some questions your way, that's kind of how our last interview organically developed too. You opened that talk by saying, I met Father Ripperger at this conference. I think you said, you didn't say I look up to him, but you said, I definitely really respect him. And I think that he brings a lot to the table. You say shorter than I thought. I had the same experience when I met him, a year ago. And I think he's becoming even more and more, forward about just, putting himself out there. And then you just went into your critiques. Let me ask you, like, what is it that you like about him? What is it that you really, really appreciate about Father Ripperger? Because, when people hear more of that, they're not going to take this as like the diss track. You know what I mean? Because people should be taking away genuine value and like, how do we improve Holy Mother Church? How do we pray for Father if he's got nakedness, right? We're supposed to cover for the nakedness of our fathers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that, Kyle.
Yeah.
And I did, my only impression of him before meeting him at our Sorrowful Mothers ministry was like, he's just this this YouTube guy, a trad favorite, especially Rad Trad Inc. would tend to really love him and like him and quote him, have him on all their platforms. But meeting him in person, aside from the demon gossip, I really found him to be, I think, a sincere person. And I think he was truly, and he seemed to be a person who, I love priests who will share their time. And I love priests who don't say no. Like, if someone demands something of them, like, hey, can you come do this for me? Can you come to this conference, or can you come to this podcast? And can you do this? Can you do that? My impression of him and everything that I've seen him do over at Sophia Press or Sophia Institute seemed to be a priest who doesn't say no, wants to share his time. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that about him. And all priests, I would say, I love, just for the faculties, the gifts that they receive from Christ Jesus and their ministry that they have, the indelible mark that they have on their soul. Even Father James Martin, I just have to love him as a priest, even though I may not like some of the things that he does. Right. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I mean, it takes one to know one. He's got to be in the top percentile of IQ. And there's something very special about that, right? Because you can go so high in the high echelon of IQ that you tend to take on neuroses, right? Like, it almost becomes hard to function. No, seriously, you get savants, you get this, that, and whatever. And he's extremely blessed because he's right at that precipice where he doesn't have that, but he's an extremely brilliant mind. And I would say the positives that I really appreciate about him that are pertinent to this discussion is that he has identified a serious concern about the charismatic side of things, right? You've got charismatic and then you've got red trad ink, right? The spectrum.
Yeah.
And with the charismatics, they mean well, right? Because nature abhors a vacuum. So there was a point with everything, you could debate if it's, the wake of Vatican II, the sexual revolution, all the different things that were going on in the mid 20th century, right? An approved church apparition, Our Lady of Quito, Ecuador, Our Lady of Good Success, right? February 2nd, 1610. She states that beginning the second half of the 20th century, there will be almost no faithful priests left on earth, right? This is a church approved apparition. Yeah. And so there's clearly some serious stuff going on in the times that we're living in right now. And Father Ripperger identified that we've got these charismatics, and that movement did stem from Protestantism, right? Yeah. With all of the erroneous take on how to do deliverance ministry and things like that. And he says, no. We need to reclaim the Catholic way to do this. And he's trying to bridge that gap, close that knowledge gap, and connect it to the present, which is an incredible thing. And I think by and large, he's doing a phenomenal job. So that's a good thing. I think that it's good to steelman him and to identify, like, listen, Father, maybe if you're hearing that your flock are getting this kind of a takeaway from you sharing this information, we need to do one of a couple things, right? So this is bringing solutions to the table. We need to think about how Jesus and St. Paul would couch things in parables, couch things in. St. Paul gave the entire church the tradition of, I know someone who X, Y, and Z happened to them, right? And he's really talking about himself, but he's in humility. He doesn't want to go all in on this like really, intense thing. And you see so many great saints and mystics throughout church history fall in line with that. St. Teresa of Avila is my personal favorite example. She's like my best friend out of the canonized saints. Awesome. So yeah. So, she's like, oh, I know someone who experienced this different thing or whatever within the levels of the 9 levels of prayer. And so Father Ripperger, maybe he could do something like that. Another idea is to help people realize, I do have to push back on the demon gossip thing. I get it, but here's another way to look at it, right? Because let's define gossip from a Thomistic understanding, right? It's like, it's sharing, it's a sin of the tongue where you're sharing information that's not due to your state in life, right? It's about other people, it's about other, whatever. And what separates it from being gossip as opposed to not is whether or not there's a purpose for it, whether or not it's fitting, right? There's 3 things actually that need to be in place simultaneously for something not to be considered a sin of the tongue like that, detraction, calumny, whatever. And that would be, authority, necessity, and charity. You need to have all of those at the same time, right? So in recognizing the precept of charity, the St. Francis de Sales, Doctor of the Laity, and so many others before and after him point out that the precept of charity is if you do not have all of the information, you must provide the most charitable outlook you can possibly provide on the situation. And to that, I would point out how there are cases in church history where the information that ended up being revealed from the session was beneficial to Holy Mother Church. In fact, I was in touch with one of my exorcist friends just today about this, and I wrote down something that he said. He had mentioned that there was an Italian exorcist in 2019 on the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. That would be, I believe, October 7th, right? Concomitant with Our Lady of Victory, with the Battle of Lepanto, commanded the demon to speak about the power of the Rosary. And there were some really important things that were shared about the Rosary, hammering the demons. And this ends up getting shared from time to time publicly by exorcists. So you see, there's instances where if what we can get out of this information is, and we just know it's true, and it can inspire us to focus our energy back on Jesus Christ and not get caught up in the magnificence of it all, then we're on the right track. Another example that actually bled it, because I meditated a lot about this in preparation for our episode. It's like, what Father Ripperger has done is he's gained some sort of knowledge in a session. He is confident enough, and this is a very smart man, he's discerned that he has combated that demon to the point where he has it subjected, and it is actually telling the truth here. He's confident that his discernment is such that that's accurate. And now it's making its way to a public conference and then on the internet, which could be viewed by billions, right? So that's a progression. And I was trying to think, like, is there something in church history that we can compare that to, pre-internet era, to wrap our mind around it? And what came to mind was when Protestantism first began, there was a very famous exorcism case at the time where a young boy in a certain town or city, whatever it was, got possessed. And it became I'm going to use a germane term, it became a measuring contest between Catholics and Protestants of who's more right, who can, clean up this mess. And, they were back and forth. It seemed like they were both making gains. It was a giant, battlefield in a game almost with the demons. And the rubber hit the road when the demons were like, you need to get a bishop involved or we're not out of here. And the Protestants at the time were like, we don't have a bishop, so Catholics came in, bishop cleaned up the problem, and the whole community, the town, was taught something pedagogically at that moment, that the Catholic Church is the one true church, because it has the authority alone to handle this kind of a situation. So there you can see how the information that happened within the case made its way to the entire community for the well-being of the community. So there is a place for that. That being said, I think that you can get really nuanced with that and juxtapose that with what Father Ripperger is doing. And I still think that there's some best practices that he can maybe employ moving forward.
Yeah.
Does that
I love what you said. Yeah, I love what you said about the distinction between, like, what I'm saying about gossip, the sharing of information, that we would not have known otherwise, like the Gnosis, versus, the sin of gossip. And I like your distinction where you said charity, truth, dignity of the person. And that's true, because like you said earlier, that he's not mentioning, when I was exercising Joe Smith, this, so he's not talking about the person. So, man, I really love that. But let's, as we wrap up this piece, I want to transition into, your conversion story, get into AI before we get out of here. But I appreciate everything that you said. I love the context that you brought. I love the deeper knowledge of Father Ripperger that you brought. I love how you address some of my concerns, especially with those prayers of deliverance from Freemasonry, which, oh my gosh, they make my mind explode. they do. I just oh my gosh, I just want people to get to confession. What's the sin? Name your sin.
It's worth 100 exorcisms.
Yeah. I just want people to rely on the sacraments, right? But man, Kyle, I have to say, man, I just leave the conversation, probably because you have deeper knowledge of this whole thing. I leave this conversation being even more concerned about people falling into fascination and getting away from the sacramental life when they pursue this type of information. And I don't think I make that distinction, when they pursue. Because if they're at a conference with Father Ripperger and he just shares this, I think that's one level. But the people who are enticed by that to pursue this even deeper and just cling to this information and make it part of their spiritual formation, or make it part of the path they want to pursue, and really gets them off track from the sacramental life. I'm leaving this conversation with you, man, just being more concerned.
That's fine, man. That's fine. And I agree with you to a point. I mean, I think that there's a concern with people just not knowing what to do with it. It's almost like there needs to be like a disclaimer if you're going to get into something like that. There's also the concern of I think you make a really strong point about celebrity exorcists in general. The Exorcist I spoke with today pointed that out. He was saying that, we went from the era where the Exorcist is just not known. It's a completely need to know basis. That's definitely how our local Exorcist is. He's old school. Like, you may or may not even know, unless you need someone like, myself, the intake specialist, who people have a point of contact that they know that something like this exists. Yeah. But that's kind of it. And, he was pointing out, I'm pulling up the notes here because I think this is so important to get on. There should be some discretion, he said. We've gone to an extreme. Before, you didn't even know who the Exorcist was in the diocese. You didn't know where it took place or what took place. Now we're first person. They're being watched by millions of people through interviews. And that discretion requires balance. And the other thing that's concerning to me, and this is a meta observation about the state of being a theologian in the public square in general. It has nothing to do with Father Ripperger specifically. I've noticed some of the comments that you get on some of your videos where people they're so devoted to him that any pious criticism is lost in translation. I sure hope that doesn't come through in the way that I'm presenting the information, because I have, like I said, a deep affinity and love for Father Ripperger. Maybe I'll get into it in my conversion story, that, I believe that man has done incredible good, but he's not infallible.
You're not coming off as culty at all. Not at all.
I appreciate it. Well, yeah, I mean, he's not infallible. So we need to be careful there. And when you bring that much attention to yourself, people are going to hang on your every word. And it's when he does the conferences, by and large, they're like Chrysostom, they're liquid gold, like he's like 21st century Thomas Aquinas podcast. It's great. But then you mentioned how he goes on some of these interview circuits, and you get a different version of the man where he's letting his hair down a little bit.
Right.
And then when you get a hot take of the man in real time, sometimes you hear things that absolutely do not jive with things that he used to say in a more scholarly setting. And by the way, almost every theologian on earth does this. It's called being a human being.
Yeah.
And so, like a perfect example, he was recently on US Grace Force, and he was not lauding the SSPX, but he was saying, like, listen, it's not like I'm a huge fan of them or anything, but they've got this, and this, they're doing some good things around here, which is completely juxtaposed to his more scholarly Q&A that he had done years ago, where he basically says there's a serious problem here, right? Yeah. Because, and theologians debate about that all the time. Is it considered material schism versus formal schism? But the reality is that once Benedict XVI in 2009 said that they have absolutely no jurisdiction in the church, and that will never change until they are completely doctrinally on board, all of these getting in the weeds about 2 out of 7 sacraments and everything else is completely missing the point of the spiritual dangers that can be there. And my point is that when you get somebody that people look up to as such an authority figure, you got to be really, really careful when you just throw off a one-off comment like that. So, I think, what you're trying to bring to the fore is that, listen, none of us here are bulletproof. Romans 3:23 mode, right? Like, all men fall short of the glory of God. And we're here to sharpen each other's iron. We're here to build up the kingdom of Christ on earth. And I think there is an extra reverence when you're dealing with a father. And we want to cover for his nakedness like the sons of Noah did. I hear what you're saying, David.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Let's get into different parts of the show. This is David L. Gray Show, Off Code Unscripted. Speaking with Kyle Dean. Check him out over on his YouTube channel. He has some awesome content there, man. He's doing really great things at Catholic Holis. Let's get into a little bit of his conversion story. So, Kyle, what is give us a short and skinny about your background. Where'd you come from? What led you into the church?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a complicated story, but also real simplistic. One thing that's super common in my generation is the revert, right? this idea of the Catholic revert. I was born and raised Catholic, technically speaking, and yet my catechesis was almost non-existent. You go through the motions of things, but there was a lot of concerns there. And also product of divorce. So textbook statistic in that regard, with all of the wounding and ugliness that comes with that. Parents divorced when I was 2. So, you've got, as I'm growing, you're getting, one version of the faith expression from how one parent expresses it, another one from another parent in another household. Thanks be to God, I had both parents present to me. And of course, I'm blessed to be able to say they did the best that they could with what they had to give. I'm grateful for the gift of life and honoring my parents in the 4th commandment. But with the challenges that come with that, you're getting one message in one home. You're getting another message in another home. You're getting another message in public school for me. You're getting another message being raised by babysitters as a glorified orphan. And then you're getting another message at CCD, right? The Confraternity for Christian Doctrine, and, religion school, right? So you're getting ready for your confirmation. And that's a lot to process. You know what I'm saying? So, and then you get weird things, I also, I had a babysitter who was letting us play with Ouija boards by day, and then and that babysitter was a religion teacher at one of the local Catholic churches by night. The same one where I ended up getting confirmed. So it's like, you get this whole hodgepodge of just all of the different issues that are happening in our generation, right? We all know that over 1.5 of nuclear families are divorced at this point, and now as we get into the next generation, it's bifurcating even further with all of the identity confusion. So as I'm growing up in that, I am a self-proclaimed atheist by high school because edgy teenager, think I got it figured out. End up in college. And the college that I went to, they actually pick your courses for you in the first trimester. And so I was placed into Intro to Philosophy. And Philia Sophia, the love of wisdom. It is the most incredible thing. It's like my first love. But it was also a secular slipshod snapshot version of it, where you get all of these different, thinkers, and there's absolutely no cohesion, no system. And then you're left to say, all right, figure out your truth. What is your truth? What does it mean for you? Right. It's this moral relativism that we're all wrestling with in this day and age, the opiate of the masses. And so here I am, suffering like almost like a spiritual schizophrenia, I would call it, because you're left trying to put the pieces together and figure out, where do I fit in with all of this? Right. So I ended up having an extremely profound spiritual experience. I had a near-death experience coming out of my freshman year of college. And I've never actually really spoken about this publicly, but I've received faculties recently from my spiritual director to get into it. So, because the authenticity of what came out of this spiritual experience has been vetted thoroughly after 10 years of spiritual direction. But I was enveloped in the white light, completely and totally, like I was on the precipice of death. It felt like I was about to leave this earth. One of the last thoughts I had was, I'm literally never going to see my mom ever again. And now I am enveloped in the white light. And next thing I know, I am pulling back into it, clutching my steering wheel, because I'm parked, by the way, at this point, screaming, "No, God, please, no, not yet. People still need my help here." And it's like I came out of being on the verge of, I don't know, experiencing my personal judgment. I mean, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, my entire body was set on fire within. So a light and then a fire for me. And it was in every iota of my being. I mean, parts of my body I didn't even know existed. And it was just this extraordinary experience. And next thing I know, I'm left basically trying to put the pieces. Okay, well, what was that? All right, we got this intro to philosophy. We've got this experience. I need to discern the truth. Why did those words come out of my mouth? Like, what's going on here? You know? And so I started to share it with my, my parents, obviously two completely different worlds there. And they didn't believe me, like it was,
Wow.
I won't use the word traumatizing, but it was an extraordinary time. So that led to some severe trials and then a journey of discovery. And I ended up devouring all of the world religions I could possibly get my hands on, like all Zoroastrianism of ancient Persia. You get the duality of the good and the evil god.
Yeah.
You get, of course, the emerald tablets of Thoth, and Hermes and all of this esoteric craziness. Hinduism or the Sunata Dharma, as it's referred to, Buddhism. As I'm going on in college, I rekindle with the professor who brought us Intro to Philosophy. And this man is the head of the religion department at a very credentialed school. I went to the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is, one of the top 3 computing universities in America.
Yeah.
And, as I mentioned at the time, there was the trimester system, which is it's extremely rigorous, very high burnout rate at that school. And so as I'm going on, I take Eastern Asian philosophy with the professor. So he's the head of the religion department and the head of the philosophy department. And he's a devout Buddhist. And he got the direct Dharma transmission from the Buddha in Japan. Currently, he brought out this scroll showing us the lineage from the original Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, in the 400s BC, down to the Japanese lineage. You had the Theravada and the Mahayana schools of Buddhism that came with Buddha. And then you had, it ended up splitting off into these different streams and rivers of thought in the chain of causation throughout the millennia. And at some point, Zen hit the scene. And then you have a split within Zen of the Soto and the Rinzai schools. With the Rinzai school, they're much bigger on koans, which are these paradoxical phrases that are meant to expand your mind and try to transcend duality and all of the things that go with that ethos. Yeah. And then I was in the Soto school. So I'm learning this stuff. I'm devouring all these religions. I'm trying to synthesize. And essentially, I fell into the trapping of New Age, which I would describe in a sentence is quintessentially falling into error that God is at the top of a mountain and there's more than one way up that mountain. Choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
And so as opposed to what did Jesus Christ reveal in the Gospels? I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is no way to the Father except through me. The narrow gate, right? Versus the wide gate that leads to perdition. So here I am discerning this authentic experience, but not knowing what it is, trying to place statements of what I think it is, according to what all these different world religions would believe it to be.
Yeah.
And then finally, thanks be to God, the reversion happened. So it happened because I was introduced to my mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And in all of the mix of all of this, this knowledge quest that I'm on, I'm starting to imbibe the Marian apparitions, right? And, I'm falling in love with Our Lady of Fatima. I'm falling in love with Our Lady of Guadalupe. And, exploring the patterns of how our Blessed Mother speaks to us. Very juxtaposed, by the way, to Our Lady of Medjugorje. There's a whole lot of talking going on there. It's really interesting. You mentioned Medjugorje earlier, but you look at all of these different apparitions, and the safe route when you're dealing with private revelation is allow for Holy Mother Church to put the seal of approval on that thing.
Yeah.
Once you've got that, obviously, if you are a practicing Catholic and you subscribe to the magisterium, then you can look at these things. And what I came to discover is that it's like every single thing she says comes true to the T, and it's extremely inspirational. So thanks be to God, she's in the mix with all this other stuff that I'm learning. I'm dating a pagan at this point, just before my conversion, because it wasn't even in my mind that was a problem, that, we're not evenly yoked and everything that comes with that, with the spiritual dangers, until I'm breaking bread with one of my separated brothers in Christ, a Methodist at work. And he's like, how you doing today, Kyle? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing good. And he's like, how are you really doing today, Kyle?
Uh-huh.
Like,
yeah.
I love this chick. I think I care about her, but she's a pagan, and I'm feeling God call me the other direction. I'm back into the Bible and all this stuff. And he's like, whoa, stop there right now. Get out. You're dating a pagan? Like, what's wrong with you, man? And he convicted my heart. And so I had a Guadalupe comforter that I just bought a couple months prior. I was waiting for the right moment to open it up. And that night was the night. And so I'm chilling. I'm literally wrapped in the mantle of Mary. And we're, I hit the pillow, go to bed, get thrusted awake. And I'm looking up at an ugly, disgusting gray demon in its true heinous form. And I'm literally terrified it's extremely terrifying experience. And it's whispering incantations to my pagan girlfriend. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, either I'm absolutely nuts, like I've just gone off the deep end, or this is I'm a great former atheist. So it's like, all right, maybe this is the hypnagogic state. Like, let's give away, let's process out a natural explanation to this. And I just wake her up. I'm like, she's nuts. I'm nuts. I'm going to tell her what happened. We had no, secrets or whatever. And I'm like, listen, I care about you. I really think that, I want to be respectful of your expression, but I really think that there's an absolute truth, like an objective truth. And I think this is it. And I think Jesus is it. And I really wish that we could experience that together, but I don't know whether or not you're going to be down with that. But I'm feeling God call me another direction. Let's process this together. And within the next couple months, we amicably parted ways.
Did you ever tell her? Did you ever tell her about that demon experience?
Immediately.
What did she say?
She was just like, that's, I don't remember exact words. It was like, oh, that's unfortunate. Like, it's weird. She was just like, well, because she could do channeling and all this other horrible things. So she didn't take it like that's completely foreign to my sentimentality. It was more like, let me take this with a grain of salt because I know this guy's like a Christian or whatever. But let me process this in the context of my belief system, right? I'm sure that's what was going through her mind. And later, in the moment, it's like, why the heck are you waking me up? I'm like trying to sleep, But so it is what it is. And
how's she doing now?
I have no idea, man. This was 10 years ago.
Oh man, I'm worried about that lady. All right.
Yeah, please. Yeah, if anybody's feels called to, please pray for her. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she's where her walk is with the Lord. But what I can tell you is that, listen, it's super weird. Like the whole experience is weird. And by the way, I do not condone at all cohabiting. I should throw these disclaimers in there. Like my spiritual director has actually recently approved me sharing this story for the first time ever. My wife is comfortable with me sharing it. That's extremely important to me because it's embarrassing, right? We're talking about, when I'm absolutely lost on my journey, seeking the truth and everything else. Yeah. So it is what it is. I'm the worst sinner to walk this earth, hands down. And so I'm trying to figure this thing out, and I'm a man, I'm a guy. I'm thinking, I see a problem, I need a solution. I see a nail, I need a hammer. And so I'm thinking, okay, either, like I said, I'm nuts, in the hypnagogic state, whatever the thing is, or maybe there's something to this. I think you're supposed to pray. in a situation like this. So I didn't know any of the advanced prayers like I know now, studying litanies and everything else, but I knew the Our Father. So I'm within the next night or two or whatever, I'm starting to pray the Our Father. She's passed out. And now I'm praying. Super weird, super like she could wake up. She'd be like, "What are you doing?" Like, come on. But whatever. I mean, it is what it is. And people in the whole world are going to have views on like this is nuts. And I agree, it is. But here I am. I'm doing an Our Father, and I couldn't get more than a few lines into the Our Father before she starts convulsing in her sleep. And I'm like, well, I've never seen that in 2 years. And, and I could feel like a pushback, like it was, not good. And I was just like, okay, I'm out, like this is too much. And yeah. And yes, I told her about this all as well, if in case anybody's wondering, but, and then I did it a second night and the exact same thing happened again. So now, the good former atheist in me, right? Scientific method, right? I've got 2 sets of data to work with. You have some things added, you have other things different, right? What's different is time, 2 different time periods, 2 different sets of sleeping. I'm not doing prayers out loud, as I recall, at least not both times or the whole time. So it's not like it's hitting into her subconscious. You're going to get people talking about psychosomatic and whatever, right? There's all of that. But 2 separate times, she's having a visceral reaction to the Our Father. And I don't remember if it was after the first or the second time, but I had an instant triple infusion of knowledge, as we would say in spiritual theology, where it came from without. It was suddenly there. It wasn't there before. And it was one, everything in the Bible is real, especially thinking about Ephesians 6. The spiritual battle is real, right? Ephesians 6:12. We wrestle not with the flesh, but with the powers and the principalities in the high places. There is this invisible realm. Think of like the visual spectrum, right? We got Roy G. Biv, and then there's everything else that we can't see. It's all there. It's real. And so it was like, take that super seriously. Like maybe all this other stuff I've learned, I should really just temper that and stick with what's in the Bible. All right. Number 2 was you're feeling this pushback and it's like, whatever it is that you're trying to do right now, you are not in the driver's seat. You are not completely in control. You don't even understand the mechanics of this. Back off. It's dangerous. And, hold off and reassess. And by the grace of God, that really had a lot to do with leading me to the deliverance ministry that I've now been a part of for almost a decade. Because within a short amount of time after all of this, I had a conversion. And then not long after that, I ended up getting involved and I got put to work in the kingdom. So that was wild. And obviously I understand the mechanics of it now. And then the third one was the absolute most important by far. It was, as much as you are trying to help, trying to be part of the solution with this situation right now, trying to care about this person, this is not how it works. Like you can't just will the evil out of somebody, especially when they're not even conscious. It's just weird. It's like, that's not how this works. What needs to happen is this child of God needs to have a conscious walk with her creator. And you may or may not be a part of that. You may or may not be instrumental in ultimately her figuring that out, but she needs to do that with her Father, her heavenly Father. And as soon as I got that triple understanding instantaneously, all at the same time, it basically laid the groundwork for serious conversion into Holy Mother Church. So I just to keep it at a flyby, I ended up having, we broke up. I prayed my own personal version of a surrender prayer. I immediately gave my life over to God the day that she moved out. And it just, I had this washing of grace. It was really visceral. And it gave me the ability to convert in ways that I would have never been able to do on my own. There's no way I could do this without God's help. And it set me on the path where that literal week, I had not one, not two, but three different versions of Christianity. These different like people come into my life and invite me to their Bible studies, inviting me to their Sunday sermons and all of this stuff. Wow. And I just went for it. And it very, very quickly showed to me how all that stuff I learned growing up is super different than this, which led me down the final path of just tackling that 70,000 growing plus Mandela effect versions of Christianity that are out there from 15, 17 and onward versus the Catholic Church. And the rest is history.
Wow. So how did it, that's pretty fascinating. But how did it, so reversion to the faith, as you're processing this whole thing, this whole journey, that God allowed you to go on, so that he may be glorified. Obviously, he's being glorified. How did it make you? Did you feel cheated in a way as a youth that you didn't have this experience with the Blessed Virgin Mary, or did you feel cheated, or were you just really just embracing the journey?
I would say I didn't have that because thanks be to God I met with a mystical doctor of theology. He put me through a fine-tooth comb, and after he assessed me, he said, "Don't call it the white light anymore. Call it the divine light." When I experienced the divine light experience, there was so much infusion there. One thing I failed to mention is in order to process that spiritual schizophrenia, and I don't use that term lightly, but I also don't use it. I use it very scientifically. In the East, Eastern practitioners would say that if you can't sit still for more than 5 minutes at a time, you're schizophrenic. That's what they would call schizophrenic. And 95% of Westerners struggle with that. So, it is what it is. But I had to process and get out of all of this slipshod understanding of what I think the truth is. And one of the ways that I did that was as a concession to God. I'd thrown a Bible that we were all gifted when we got confirmed into a box going off to college. And I opened that Bible and I started on page 1 in Genesis. And as I was going through the Bible, that's what ended up leading up to having that experience. And somewhere along the way in that whole journey, I got through the whole Bible that year. The book of Job really, really got me. I really got out of the book of Job that we really have no right to blame God for anything at all. So, that had a lot to do with, okay, the Blessed Mother didn't, it wasn't time for her to come in and give me the perspective to understand even what happened back then, all those years prior with the divine light, until it was all in God's perfect timing. So I'm thankful for that journey. But yeah, obviously growing up, it was extremely rough. It was a hard knock life. So.
Yeah. In your experience growing up in a home like that, and now you're a father of 4, husband of 1, what type of father has that made you, and a type of husband that's made you? What type of things have you, the good and the bad that you've taken from your upbringing, how's that formed you, your husbandry and your fatherhood now?
Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I would say that really, really growing in a deep appreciation for everything that Holy Mother Church has to offer for us, of course, comes with the sacramental awareness, right? And one of those sacraments is matrimony. And we obviously know that, when you are in a covenantal relationship as opposed to just a contractual one, there's just so much that comes with that. There's Christ, loving his church, right? The man is the head. The woman is, the body. And, Ephesians 5, right? Ephesians 5 is just absolutely beautiful. And so when you grow in a profound awareness of that and understanding of that and appreciation for that, there's so many things that you need to keep at the forefront of your understanding, right? One is that you're a husband first, a spouse first, and then a parent second. It has to be in that order, or it's a usurpation of the kingdom, right? It's a usurpation of the nuclear family, because that's not the order of operations. So you have to be grounded with your spouse in order to give a good life, a holy life, a holistic life, if I may, to your children. And as someone who didn't have that growing up, it has everything to do with fueling my recognition of my purpose, right? Keeping to the fore my duty and my state in life, right? We all have to keep prioritized our duties and our states in life, right? You're either a spouse first, or if you're called to holy orders, right? You exercise the religious life. And then, you, like I said, in the married life, you're taking care of your children. And then you've got work as a man. You have to be the provider and the protector. And then there's everything else. There's community, right? You get that through church. There's relationships, friendships, activities, and everything else that comes. And you really, really have to keep that order in check, right? And that's why, Holy Mother Church gives us orariums, rules of life, modalities by which to live. So yeah, I appreciate the question. I just, it was rough growing up, and it is an absolute joy to be able to be a part of reversing the generational baggage that came before, and trying to set that example for the next generation.
Yeah. And then it says, "Glory be to God." And then ask, Kyle, do you go to the Latin Mass or the ordinary form?
Yeah, so I heavily prefer the Latin Mass personally. The Latin Mass had a lot to do with my conversion as well. I started going early 2015, and I got married in the Latin Mass. My children are baptized in the Latin Rite, the old rite, which has 3 exorcisms as opposed to 1 in the Novus Ordo rite. And so I have that grounding, which I'm extraordinarily thankful for, when it comes to having an awareness of where tradition fits in that 3-legged stool, that those 3 pillars that hold up Catholicism, right? Scripture, tradition, and magisterium. I also go to Novus Ordos. I love a Reverent Novus Ordo. And it's been interesting, right? Because, I think at one point I probably would identify as a trad. I think that some of these, distinctions, like we had talked in the earlier segment, they can be, they have a use. It's almost like stereotypes, right? Stereotypes exist for a reason. There's usually a grain of truth behind them. That's but true. Also, you know what I'm saying? But there's also, time and place, context, and, be careful. You could get hurt if you're not, coming correct. So too with everything that comes with the trad distinction. And you've got mad trads, you've got glad trads, you've got rad trads, and you've got everything in between, right? And then, so I try to keep it to my theological competence when getting into something like that, because also being in the deliverance field, I am acutely aware of the fact that there are energumen, which is the term for those suffering from possession, the affliction of possession, that have been liberated by a consecrated host in the Novus Ordo. We also have documented evidence of Eucharistic miracles that were confected in the Novus Ordo. So I do not subscribe to the tensions out there that would say that, the Novus Ordo is somehow not of God, or, that it's an objective occasion of sin or evil or vice or whatever, because that is on its face is heretical. It's erroneous. It is not true. But I think that we should get back to our traditions, of what came before. There's definitely something to Our Lady of Good Success, February 2nd, 1610, in Quito, Ecuador, warning that there's something about the second half of the 20th century. And then you have Our Lady of Fatima coming in saying we're going into some sort of, period of diabolic disorientation. And, I think that there's a profundity to Ad Orientem, right, where the priest is facing God along with everybody else. So we know where the focus is, that this is a sacrifice versus populum, right, facing the people, where there's this temptation because you're making so much eye contact, and then it can become like a performance, and you've got multiple expressions of the Eucharistic prayer, so you've got all this choice as opposed to just looking at the rigors of the book of Exodus, right, where it's like God is specific in the way that he wants to be worshipped. And by the way, I have to credit Father Ripperger for some of my gleanings on that, but I don't go so far as to say that, Bunini's a Freemason. No one has ever produced those images. In fact, I've asked Father Ripperger when we met, hey, can we please have those? Like, I have an intense background in tech, and, you can't tell me from a level of pragmatism that those can get scrubbed from the internet to the point where we'll never be able to find them, right? Like, that's what I was told, but I don't buy that. In the era of WikiLeaks, in the era of this and that and whatever, there are professionals out there. Just like I don't buy that, no one knows where Vigano is. That is like categorically impossible in the 21st. It's impossible. But anyways, I digress. We are way beyond. Do I go to the Latin Mass, the Novus Ordo? But I prefer the Latin Mass. I'm tri-ritual. I chant. I actually introduced the Gregorian chant back into the parish I was married in. And I'm so thankful to God for that opportunity. It was, from what I understand, for the first time since 1969, when it was suppressed. That's a huge deal. I love music. I love chant. I've got loads of chant books here. And I also chant in the Eastern liturgy, the Byzantine liturgy. I seen Dennis Grade, you flashed in the comments earlier. That's my brother in Christ. We founded East to West Theology, another YouTube channel that's out there, and people should check it out. So, but I like the Latin Mass because it puts me in level 2 of prayer. Level 2 is mental prayer. The Latin Mass allows you for the quietness to be able to do that, versus the Novus Ordo, which is there's a lot of talking. And so it's more level 1, vocal prayer focused. And level 2 is the gateway to the upper 7 levels of prayer, right? Effective prayer at 3, prayer simplicity. Those are the ones we can do on our own. Then mystical contemplation, prayer of quiet, prayer of union, prayer of conforming union, and ultimately the goal, mystical marriage, which is, Vatican II actually called the universal call to holiness, fulfilling the precept of Matthew 5:48, being perfect, even as Christ Father in heaven is perfect. So I love the Latin Mass for that, and the fact that it formed the vast majority of our ancestors. I don't think anybody should knock that.
Yeah, I think if you look at Sanctum Concilium, I think, no, I'm sorry, the General Instruction of the Roman Missal, it does allow for periods, and it does recommend it, periods of silence. The problem is that, like everything, there's just no application of it once you get down to the level of praxis in most parishes. Like you said, they just want to fill all the space up with noise and get out of there in 1 hour, no matter what. So in this, I think that's tremendously harmful to people's faith, that we don't include more silence into the liturgy. So yeah, thanks for that. The long form answer. And I think Dennis wants to piggyback on that. The Byzantine, you guys know, you watch this channel, my preference is the Byzantine, is my first love. That's where my heart is, in the East. I find that to be true worship. It was my first experience of the Mass was, just really basic, just in a prison room. But and I found that to be extraordinary. I found that to be it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. In just this bare 12 by 10-foot room. It was just, I was like, wow, this is worship. Everyone's quiet. And it was completely reverent. And there was no pictures on the wall, no icons, no stations of the cross, no little doors that you open up, nothing, no large crucifix. But I knew this was a sacred space. But when I encountered the Byzantine Mass, my heart just swooned, and I had come home in a sense. Um, so I don't. That's one thing I miss being here in Germany. That my only opportunity for that is like a train ride that's still like 3 hours. So, but yeah, what was your thoughts when you first experienced the Byzantine or any of the Eastern rites?
So I just fell in love. I had the great privilege of going to a church that was just strikingly beautiful. And with a priest who's a chess master. And I mean, he's training us up on chess. I mean, just an incredible man, good confessor, and loved the chant. You know, the chant is different. I do believe that I am, you know, Western at heart. It's funny. My brother Dennis Goudet is on the screen right now. I mean, there's just so much to say about how we kitten play, right, with East to West, because I have that Latin, you know, the Tridentine training, if you will, which is, you know, a very, very small segment of Catholicism. You think of, you know, then the SSPX, they've got about 600,000 parishioners, according to their own website. The rest is either what was in adult parishes under JP2, I think circa 84. And then, you know, you've got the FSSP, the Fraternal Society of St. Peter, that branched off of the SSPX in 1988 with the scandal of the consecrations. You've got the Institute of Christ the King in 1991, and then some other smaller ones. And you put all that together between them and diocesan, and you're looking at maybe around 1 million. So, I mean, if you process that, that is like a sliver of Catholicism today, really, really small. And in Dennis's faith tradition, Byzantine, Eastern Catholic, you know, that accounts for the bulk of, I think it's the 5 churches. You know, he could correct me at some point, but then you've got about 23, maybe 24 now approved rites within those 5 churches, Byzantine being one of them. And that in toto accounts for about 15, maybe 16 million Eastern Catholics, because unfortunately in 1054 AD, there was the split with the Great Schism, where today you have about 280 million to 300 million Eastern Orthodox. So, you know, we endeavor to breathe with both lungs of the one Holy Catholic Church and to kind of reclaim a holistic Catholic spirituality in appreciating both. So I'm Western for sure. And I prefer, you know, what comes out of the Tridentine Mass. Dennis loves the Eastern liturgy. I was super edified by it. I've got a profound background with the Eastern Asian upbringing, learning Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, and all the different things that came from that, and bringing that to the fore, while he's also been trained in the West, but being Eastern, you get a real good synergy of an appreciation for all of it.
Yeah. Definitely.
And by the way, thank you for sharing, David, about, you know, how it impacted you being in prison and everything else, man. I can't even imagine coming to Christ, you know, stripped of all of the nice, you know, ornate things that you're going to get at a church, but to be able to discern and appreciate an Eastern awareness of the faith expression. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it was. And I got a few questions here I want to get to for you. And we're gonna have to come back another time and do the AI thing. You know, we're just way past the time now. But I want to get to these questions. A lot of people really interested in your conversion story. And Bradley Chase, he asked, honest question: a priest and a young man who takes other struggles upon himself came to our house and said many deliverance prayers. My wife and I felt as if we were dizzy, swaying. What was that?
Oh, I'm not going to make a diagnostic on that. I really appreciate, Bradley, you sharing that testimonial. You know, a priest and a young man who taking other struggles upon themselves, you know, it's hard to know for sure what that meant to them as opposed to how it was experienced. But I would need to understand more context behind why they were there in the first place. I mean, if you've got a priest of God, I'm assuming Catholic, that is coming with a young man, is this young man, I mean, is this priest an exorcist? Is this young man, does he work for him? I don't know. And, you know, you're having this visceral physical experience. I mean, there could very much be something to that. You know, there's one of the things that's critical to discern. In fact, this is actually a pious critique that I have of one of your recent videos, David, was, you know, it feels like when Father Ripperger tells everybody to repeat things 3 times, it seems like almost like witchcraft or like some sort of like a ritual. What's the point? Just stick to the
Oh yeah,
sacraments.
tapping my heels together 3 times. Yeah, that was my punchline.
Yeah. There's actually an answer to that. So, I mean, 2 uses or purposes for that. One would be, it's the same thing that you see in the Tridentine Latin Mass. You see these triple repeating aspects. It's because it's for multiple reasons, but one huge one is to tap into the reality that God is a Trinity. So, you know, you're acknowledging God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and particularly if you're trying to break a curse, you know, you're trying to undo, because a lot of times in the magical rituals, you're going to get an inversion of that, because that's what the devil does. So that's one reason for that to happen. And then the other one is going back to attempting to answer Bradley's question to the best I can with the information that's available. It's that when you're trying to discern invisible experiences, right? Like as an intake specialist, when I'm bringing in, when we're witnessing to somebody, our initial job is to try to figure out, you know, is this psychological in nature? Is this spiritual in nature? Or as can often be the case, is it a mixture of both? And therefore, how do we make sure that we're applying the appropriate remedies? And of course, the Catholic Church is very discerning about this. You have to rule out the natural, right? The psychological first. But when you're in the realm of the spiritual, we have a set of tools by which we do that, right? And it's harnessing the tools that are found in philosophy and the tools that are found in theology. And philosophy, you know, is a science, right? It's the ultimate end it's the ultimate light that man can ascertain by the natural light of his own reason, right? It's the pinnacle of what we can figure out. St. Thomas Aquinas says that every single degree, every art and every science in existence is when the Catholic Church gifted mankind with the university system in the thousands or 1100s, all degrees are subalternated to philosophy, right? Like an engineering degree is subalternated to physics, which is subalternated to mathematics, which is subalternated to philosophy. And there's something happening there. You can tell when a science or an art is petering out, because when the first principles from which you discern the rest of that science stop somewhere and it starts taking things for granted as true in order to apply this, it's borrowing that from a higher science, right? It's subalternated to something higher. Philosophy is the tool where we discern what's going on in the invisible realm, because that's where you get metaphysics. It's where you get logic. It's where you get epistemology, right? It's where you get morality. And those are extremely important tools in order to discern, is this something diabolic in nature? So you would need to apply that in order to try to figure out what's going on specifically in Bradley's case.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And Bradley says, the man was from seminary. Okay, all right. Yeah, I like your point about the theory. I love the repetition in the liturgy, or even when it comes to the sacraments, right? Of course, my concern about sacramentals and people's uncertainty and not feeling as, oh, did I do it enough times? Do I have to do it again and again and again? How many times do I have to do it? That always concerns me. And even in, my practice of Wiccanism and Freemasonry, everything is in threes. You have to do it 3 times. You march 3 times around the lodge in the first 3 degrees. 3 degrees. It's just 3 knocks on the door. It's just, everything is in repetition, and so so I see demonic aspects as well. They would also focus on repetition. And so any time I hear this outside of the sacraments, I just have a suspicion, man. Are people not going to trust what's going on? And so that's really my concern about the 3 times.
And you do need to be on guard against scruples, right? If you've got people worrying about the devil being under every rock, they're opening their deliverance prayers for the laity book every single day, like making it their primary devotion, right? you don't need to necessarily do something like that unless you are dealing with a very extraordinary circumstance and you've been given a specific prescription by the authorities.
Yeah. Yeah. William Penn says, going back to the demon gossip is fascinating. And that's precisely the problem, is a distraction from what the faithful ought to be focused on. Do you agree with that, or what's your thoughts on that, Kyle?
I mean, we touched on it earlier, right? I mean, whether or not it can be said that what Father Ripperger is doing is gossip, I think is still up for debate. If not, I mean, it would be great to get him involved, right? We can all email info@sensustraditionis.org and try to connect and collaborate. That's what we should all be doing. So, like I said before, you have an instance in church history where the information from the case made it out to the community because it taught everybody something. You have the 2019 instance that my Exorcist colleague pointed out earlier today. So there is something to that, but you do need to be cautious, as we've been touching throughout this conversation. Like, if this is at the realm of private revelation and it could be prone to error and it's happening in real time, as you're saying, it's like, in general, the church teaches to be super cautious about something like that. Let it play out. And in that vein, yeah, maybe people are not focused on what they should be focused on.
Yeah. And in your conversion story, a lot of people made a couple comments. Bradley came in and said, "Our Blessed Mother is so beautiful." And then once you started talking about what's happening with the ex-girlfriend, Yankee City Girl says, "That escalated quickly." Then,
oh yeah, it did.
Then William says, "Whoo, yeah, that really went up a notch."
Yeah,
that is good stuff, man. Kyle Dean, thanks for coming on the show, man. I gotta have you back, man. We can dig into the AI topic, man. We went a long time, and so I really appreciate all the time.
Oh my goodness, you spent 2 hours.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the time that you spend here and everything that you share, man. You're a really cool guy, and love the ministry that you're doing. You and Dennis over there, so keep it going. And I gotta have you back, man. Appreciate you.
It's a great privilege, pleasure, and honor. Thank you again, Dr. David L. Gray. Appreciate you. And let me know when Further Hell Nah is going to make an appearance on our episodes, bro. Because I need to. I don't know if it's like Dr. David L. Gray sometimes, Brother David at other times, which is my default in ministry, just brother, sister, whoever. Very Franciscan. And then there's Father Hell Nah, man. You know, like, I want to know when he's coming on the scene.
Oh yeah, he'll be back September 10th, man. He'll
oh shoot.
Oh yeah. So I think next week he'll be back. Very funny episode. I'm not gonna spill anything, but it's gonna be spicy, as Kyle likes to say. So we'll see. All right, God bless you, man. Thanks for everyone. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. David L. Gray Show, Off Code Unscripted on St. Dominic's Media. Remember, Jesus loves you and is there for you. So go ahead, live your life like salvation matters. But until then, till next time, blessings and shalom to you and to yours. God bless.